Good morning, folks. We are starting this webinar a little early as we are hopefully live streaming this on Facebook, getting it all set up. So welcome to our folks. See, we've got some folks who are starting to join us. We'll be starting in just a couple minutes. Welcome, folks. Really excited. I see more folks are joining us. We are going to get started in just a few short minutes, just making sure all of our technology works. Looks like we are live on Facebook. Um, and we'll get started shortly. If any of our folks who are joining us live on the Zoom webinar want to introduce themselves in the chat, just who they are and where they're coming in from today, that'd be great. You're more than welcome to. Or anybody even on our live Facebook stream, if you want to enter in the comments, you are more than welcome to also just introduce yourself, say, hey, we'd love to see who is joining us today. Okay, it is noon on the dot Central Time, and I want to be mindful of my amazing facilitators today, Katie and Kristen, and their time. So I will get started real fast, even though it doesn't say my name on there. But Katie will be saying hello momentarily. But hello, everybody. My name is Kim Kushner. I serve as our Assistant Director of New Student and Family Programs here at UMKC. Whoops, have my Outlook open. I should probably not have that open. But I am so excited today to welcome Katie Gary, our Associate Director from Residential Life, and Kristen Temple, who is our Director of Residential Life. Both are here. Katie's going to do more of the talking, but both of them are a wealth of resources to help answer Q&A and just to help provide a bunch of information about residential life at UMKC, what move-in looks like, and hopefully you all as parents, families, and supporters can feel real great moving forward after this today, getting most of your questions answered, feeling really comfortable, knowing that your student is going to have that home away from home. Katie, if you could advance the slide. Before we get started and before Katie and Kristen are awesome and present and introduce themselves, I just wanted to, my basic slides I go over to make sure folks feel really welcomed and comfortable at parent and family programs related stuff, is defining what parent and family means. I love this photo because it's from Family Weekend a few years ago when one of our students, like entire family from clearly toddler, infant to grandma, grandpa came, and we see family as being, not just limited to what is listed in this slide, but really anybody who serves as a primary or caring supporter of a UMKC student. It's just really everybody exactly matters in the support of this of our student success. And Kristen reminded me as she put it in the chat, just a few housekeeping pieces. If folks have questions along the way in this webinar, we ask that you use the Q&A and we would love to, or the Facebook comments, we would love to help and answer your questions. You are more than welcome to use the chat if we say something that you're like, yeah, awesome, or you want to introduce yourselves. But we prefer folks for just questions that we can answer and make sure to use the Q&A. Katie, go ahead and advance that slide. And hopefully many of you look like recognizable. I can see some attendee names and just some familiar names. And hopefully I'm familiar to many of you all from orientation this past season. For folks who maybe aren't family members of new students and are family members of returning students, still hopefully parent and family programs is something that you've seen before. But what we are, again, is our tagline is stay involved, get connected, support your RU. We see all of you again as caring partners, as important partners in supporting your student success, so that in 2, 4, 6+ years, we can celebrate with you as your student graduates and becomes an active alum from UMKC. For the sake of time, I encourage you to go to our website, go.umkc.edu/parent-family-programs, and learn more about all the multitude of ways to get connected. We'll also have a recorded version of this webinar on our resources page. So without further ado, I'm going to mute myself and let Katie and Kristen just be awesome and share a wealth of information. Again, my role will help to moderate if a question comes up. So ask questions along the way, and we will do our best to make sure everybody feels great.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Katie Geary. I'm the Associate Director for Residential Life. Our paths also may have crossed at an orientation at some point or during a visit day, and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more about residential life. I've been with the institution since 2007, and so it's a really exciting time to be a RU. The fact that this institution has had so much growth, our department has had so much growth, and I'm excited to share a little bit more about it with you. Kristen, would you like to introduce yourself right quick?
Sure. So I'm Kristen Temple. I'm the Director of Residential Life, and I have been here at UMKC since July of 2020. And I too may have crossed paths with some of you during the orientation process or on a tour. And so welcome, glad you're here.
All right, well, let's start off by talking a little bit about some of the things that we hope to hit upon during our conversation today. Not necessarily knowing where everyone's at with the contracting process, whether people are still inquiring about whether or not residential life is appropriate for their student. Some folks might have already been contracted since December, and as a result, the nitty-gritty information that really pertains to you is more so about move-in day or what happens next. So we have kind of a variety of topics we want to hit upon, and still respecting everyone's time, but we'll do a brief introduction to on-campus living. We do still have space available, so please, if you are considering staying with us, I definitely encourage you to have that discussion. Space is starting to get limited, and so we encourage you to sign the contract sooner rather than later if you're still on the fence. But we still do currently have space available in some of our room types. We'll also go into a little bit of who's who. Obviously, we just met myself and then Kristen, but we have a slew of other individuals who are really invested in student success. We'll then transition to move-in day and a little bit of what to expect. I know that for folks who already have assignments, we've been sending out emails with some preliminary information, and we'll continue to do so over the next several weeks to make sure that you have all of the resources available for that move-in day. But once you've moved in, what's next? So we'll talk a little bit about roommate relationships and how you can support your student in that relationship. Obviously, it can be a little challenging to navigate, and so we have some tried and true tips to utilize in that regard. Also, we recognize that there can be some hiccups along the way, whether that's your student needing some support, whether it's something as simple as how to file a maintenance request. So we'll spend a couple minutes talking about what that looks like. And then also highlighting different ways to get involved specifically within residential life. And then we'll wrap up with some additional important information to know, whether it's when do next year's contracts become available. I know that it's a little bit mind-bending to think that we're already talking about not this upcoming year, but the following year. But certainly we've received some questions about that, and also information about when our break periods are. Something new this year with our break periods, our students are allowed to stay in our facilities regardless of their locations. So whether they're in the residence halls, whether they're in the apartments, but we do ask for some advanced communication through a sign up form, but the break periods are all included in the contract rates. And so we do transition to reduced operations during those break periods. And so we want to make sure that you have those on your calendar. So first off, for those folks who are still on the fence about whether or not on-campus living is appropriate for your student, we have a few things that we always talk about when, families, parents, support, inquire why residential life, why on-campus housing. And one of the things that we always talk about is this development of a co-curricular environment. So it is our hope that when students stay with us, that they experience programs and services that really mirror and enhance what they are learning in the classroom. That's what we mean by that co-curricular environment. So whether it is faculty members coming into the facility to host programs, whether it's something like supplemental instruction that is having tutoring sessions in our classroom spaces, things like quiet hours to make sure that your student has a quiet place to study and or sleep in order to be successful in the classroom. We really, really strive to create that co-curricular environment. And so that academic support certainly is unlike something a student would experience in off-campus housing. A secure environment, if you've had an opportunity to come for a tour, whether through orientation or a visit day, you hopefully got to see this in action. We have a 3-tier security system in which students utilize their ID to gain access throughout various points in the facility. Our doors are locked 24/7. We also, during the academic year, have a 24-hour front desk that serves not only as an information hub, but also as a safety and security point. So there are lots of folks that are definitely invested in making sure that our facilities are safe and secure. Of course, with the convenience of where our facilities are located, unbeatable access to campus resources. So again, whether it's just the proximity to classroom spaces or places like the Atterbury Student Success Center, or whether we're shoulder tapping those resources to actually come on in, having career services over to discuss resume writing, having our life coaches through the university hanging out in our lobby that students can shoulder tap once a week is really an invaluable resource. I had mentioned that with my tenure here, there's been a lot of growth. And so it's been amazing to see a vibrant campus community. When I first started here, it was crickets and tumbleweeds after 5 o'clock on the weekday. And now that is no longer the case. We've really had some phenomenal events through organizations like the Union Programming Board, to things that we host in the evenings and on the weekends to really ensure that there is always something going on, always something to do. Likewise, we really tap into community resources too. It's not uncommon that we have a program over at the Nelson Atkins Art Museum or the Toy and Miniature Museum. We help students navigate the bus lines around campus, so that way they don't always feel as if they are confined to campus, particularly if they don't have access to a vehicle. So we really want to ensure that students feel comfortable navigating not only UMKC, but Kansas City as a whole. And of course, kind of a tongue-in-cheek point, but it is the shortest commute around. It is amazing how many students sleep in until 10 minutes before their classes start. They're running out the door, sometimes in their PJs, hopefully with their teeth brushed. But the fact that, they're not able or not having to deal with rush hour traffic, not having to worry about where they're going to park, certainly is a really great resource. And it's really great for students too, whenever they do want to partake in that vibrant campus community, that community engagement piece, that they don't go back home somewhere off campus. Instead, it's much easier to get connected whenever you are already here on campus or still here on campus. And so I guarantee oftentimes when students plan to attend something, once they're home, once they've changed into those PJs, once they've kind of got settled into the couch, it's a little bit harder to go back out to the library or to come back for an event. So it's certainly very helpful. All right, so let's talk a little bit about our housing options. Specifically, we have two residence halls. One is known as Oak Street Hall and the other is Johnson Hall. Our amenities within these facilities are very much so the same. These facilities only opened up about 5 years apart from each other. So much of what you see in Oak Street Hall, you would also see in Johnson Hall. So what I mean by that is that in both facilities, we have those 24-hour welcome desks that I mentioned that act as that safety and security hub, but also a customer service point for our students. We have community spaces that are available, study lounges, kitchens, kitchenettes available also on every floor. We have RAs or resident assistants who are available to assist students in these facilities. These are students who go through a pretty rigorous selection process and training process to ensure that they're best equipped to serve the community in which they live. So they can help from a variety of topics, mental health to I lost my financial aid to my roommate and I aren't seeing eye to eye on whose turn it is to buy the toilet paper. So it really just kind of runs the gamut there. Some of the more significant differences between the two facilities involve the living learning communities that we have available, regardless of if you participate in a living learning community or not. Again, we're really striving to create that co-curricular environment. But the living learning communities are a specific community that has a common interest or major. So for instance, in Oak Street Hall, we have the BAMD students, the 6-year med students live in this facility. Our trustees scholars live in this community. Oftentimes our first year athletes stay in this facility as well. Our pretty significant and at this point oldest, longest standing living learning community, the Honors LLC, also is housed in this facility. So really kind of a diverse academic environment. Over in Johnson Hall, we have our conservatory living learning community, our biological and chemical sciences living learning community. This is the first year that we're also having the RU Escalators Living Learning Community in Johnson, as well as the First Generation RU or the First Gen RU LLC. So we're really excited to have those communities up and running. And whether or not you fall under one of those categories, we're definitely going to have folks lined up to support you and your student throughout their on-campus living experience. Another thing to note potentially, Oak Street is a little bit larger. It houses about 550 students and Johnson Hall is smaller at about 330. So some students gravitate towards the larger facility because they are really extroverted individuals who might want a plethora of folks to choose from as far as friends are concerned. And for those who maybe want smaller, slightly more intimate communities, Johnson Hall may be of interest. So again, amenities very much so the same throughout. They do come fully furnished, twin extra long beds. We have desks, desk chairs, dresser options, and micro fridges available. So again, very, very similar. Now, for those folks who are maybe coming in as returning students or transfer students, we have 2 apartment options that are available. One of which is a master lease property. So Rock Hill Apartments is on the Volker campus. It's a pretty substantially small community. It's only about 24 bed spaces over there, but it is an option. At this point, it is a full option, and so we don't have any more vacancy in this facility for the upcoming academic year. However, we do have vacancy still at Hospital Hill Apartments. So first-time college students are not eligible again for these apartments, but at Hospital Hill, we have 1 bedroom, 1 bath options, 2 bedroom, 2 bath options, and 4 bedroom, 4 bath options. So everyone has their own bedroom and their own bathroom. If they're in a 2 or 4 person unit, they would just share the kitchen and living room space with the other individuals. At this point, we all are booked with our 1 person or 1 bedroom, 1 bath options. And so we still do, though, however, have 2 person 2-person and 4-person options available. So the Hospital Hill Apartments is located on the Health Sciences campus, regardless of Rock Hill or Hospital Hill. We include things like water, electricity, there's laundry options in every unit as well. So this is a great option for students who maybe are a little bit further along in their educational journey and would like to look at a slightly more independent living opportunity. All right, so residential life is in particularly notorious for this alphabet soup. I've already mentioned a couple different acronyms along the way, whether that's our living learning communities or LLCs, whether those are our RAs, but there are so many different folks that are a part of our department and really instrumental in ensuring that your student is successful while they stay on campus with us. So the first individual are DAs or desk attendants, and these are individuals who work the welcome desk. As you can imagine, we have some really great folks, particularly because of the 24-hour front desk. And so these are folks who are committed, again, to ensuring that they provide great customer service opportunities, that they can assist if the student needs something from the front desk. You know, we have things like board games, cookware to check out. You know, if it's a particularly rough night, plungers. I mean, we have a little bit of everything for folks to utilize. And so the desk attendants can assist in checking that out. If a student gets locked out at 1 o'clock in the morning, they can help facilitate that process. So really, really instrumental folks. The DMs or the desk managers are student employees who go through, again, that really rigorous selection and training process. They oversee the desk attendants. They live in the facility. The desk attendants, when we have openings, that information all gets posted to Handshake, but it is not a live-on requirement. For the DMs, it is a live-on requirement. So if goodness forbid something goes awry, they are available in the facility to address any issues that may arise. I've already talked a little bit about the RAs or the resident assistants. They're going to help facilitate that check-in process. So definitely as your student is getting their keys, start forging that connection right away. These are folks who are really going to sometimes even literally be in your student's corner, trying to ensure that they have all the tools necessary. They can help with, again, a variety of topics, whether your roommate and your student is maybe having a disagreement about the thermostat temperature, or, you know, it's the first day of classes and they don't know where Flushable is located. I mean, they're just really a wealth of information and eager to assist. So feel free to utilize them. We also have professional level staff available as well. These are professional staff members who not only work in the facility, but they too live in the facility. So we have our graduate level professional staff. They're known as Assistant Residential Life Coordinators, or ARLCs. And then our full-timers, these are folks who typically have their master's degree, typically have had previous housing experience, whether as an undergrad or a graduate. And these folks are the residential life coordinators, or RLCs. So their offices are generally right around the welcome desks, and so your student is more than welcome to utilize them for support. But again, if there is any after hours emergencies, not only do we have student staff responding, but we also have professional level staff responding as well. Okay, so I know a lot of folks have questions about what does move-in day look like. That definitely seems to be a pretty significant point of conversation. So our move-in days are scheduled for Wednesday, August 17th, Thursday, August 18th, and Friday, August 19th. So we do have I guess, a more individualized move-in from 8 a.m. until 12 p.m. for the School of Medicine. So again, if your student is participating in the 6-year med program and they're a year 1 in the BA/MD program, the School of Medicine has identified a more specific move-in for those individuals. And again, at Oak Street Hall, that would be from 8 a.m. until 12 p.m. on Thursday, August 18th. And so your student has the ability to go in and sign up for a move-in slot during that time frame. Otherwise, students have the ability to come in as early as that Wednesday or as late as Friday. I'll talk a little bit here about appointments and what does that look like, but those are definitely our big move-in dates, and that is applicable for all 4 of our facilities. So it does not matter if you are in Johnson Hall or Rock Hill Apartments, it is the same across the board. So all 4 of our facilities, those are our move-in days.
Katie, can you address when you go over move-in a little bit about parking as well? We had a good question in the Q&A about parking and street and all that kind of stuff. I figure you might be moving into that, but I figured I will just want to address that one question since we're
Yeah,
on that.
absolutely. Yeah, our next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what actual move-in day looks like, and it includes information about parking. But before I jump too much into what the day of looks like, I wanted to make sure that I addressed a couple different pieces here. One is that there are certain groups that have received permission specifically from Residential Life to move in early. And that is because they are part of an identified program that has a variety of, classes, workshops, events that happen before we actually open on Wednesday, the 17th. And those specifically are Bio Boot Camp program. So they have received permission to move in on August 14th, I believe from 9 to 12:30. And then for First Gen RU, they also have received permission to move in on Sunday, August 14th. And I believe that time frame is from 10 to 1. So if your student is a participant in these programs, and again, it is an identified program, it is not as simple as, yeah, my child or my student identifies as a First Gen RU. They have to be a part of that program. Or, oh yeah, my student is a biology major. These are determined programs, and so they have received permission to move in early on those days. Now, on occasion, we have also received a handful of individual requests. We do currently have an early arrival form available through RuRes, which is the platform that your student used to submit their housing contract. So if your student has, let's say, a conservatory audition or is here to start lab work early, whatever the case may be, and your student is requesting to arrive prior to the 17th, they'll need to fill out that early arrival form, again, located in RuRes. We do require documentation, so make sure that your student has that available, and then we will review that on a case-by-case basis. We don't have the ability, unfortunately, to move people in too much earlier than move-in day, because we do have summer students that are staying with us and camp and conferences that are staying with us. And so we want to make sure that we have adequate time to clean the spaces and maintenance the spaces, so that way your student walks into a great living opportunity. Now, something else to note is that meal plans, which are a required part of the residence hall contracts, meal plans do not start until the 17th. If your student is a participant in Bio Boot Camp or First Gen RU, they are taking care of meals from what I understand. But if your student had submitted an individual request for, let's say, Monday the 15th, and they were approved with that documentation, the cafeteria, which is where the meals are served, will not open until the 17th. And so I wanted to be very clear about that, because they'll be on their own for food during that time frame. So Okay, so kind of jumping in to what to expect for the move-in day. So your student has already received, if they have a housing assignment, information about how to book an appointment. So on the 17th, 18th, 19th, we do ask that students sign up for a half-hour appointment. So when you log into RuRes, you also have the ability to set up this appointment. It's generally from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that your student can't move in after 4 p.m. on one of those days, or even on the weekend if need be. Certainly, we recognize that sometimes moving in on a weekday can be challenging, particularly if, the help that they are bringing along has, work during the traditional business day. So certainly you have the ability to move in outside of those appointment times. We would just ask that you would proceed to the front desk in that location or in that instance, and we would take care of you. But otherwise, appointments definitely help us reduce the stress for both our department and for you all as you are moving in. It helps moderate the traffic. It allows for a little bit more of a seamless move-in experience. And so we definitely encourage these appointments. I know that half hour doesn't often seem like enough time or doesn't seem long enough, but we've been successful in utilizing these appointments in the past few years and are looking forward to, again, having a great move-in experience for you. I mentioned moving in potentially on that Saturday or Sunday. If possible, we really would encourage the students to move in on one of our move-in days, because Kim and her team in particular have a phenomenal weekend planned following week known as Rue Welcome. And there's some really outstanding opportunities for your students to get acclimated to the university, meet their, fellow Roos. And so the earlier that folks get here, the more opportunities your students will be able to take advantage of those really phenomenal programs. So if something happens and you need to cancel your appointment or change your appointment, you can do that, I believe, at least a 24-hour notice. So you can go in and change that. But, even though it's a half-hour time frame, we recognize that weather can play a role, that traffic can play a role. And so even though you may arrive a little bit earlier or later than your appointment, we can still get you accommodated. Trust, as someone who primarily grew up in St. Louis and still has family back there, we recognize that 70 can be a hot mess. And so we are happy to accommodate you when you arrive. But that appointment is really kind of a great target window to utilize. So of course, the next part, you arrive. Hello, you made it to UMKC. We're so excited to have you. And so once you start getting close to the facilities, there will be signage up that directs you to an unloading zone. And so the way that we have our appointments set up, I'm hoping that you won't have to wait to get into that unloading zone for very long, but there will be people at the entrance of that unloading zone to greet you, to also record a little bit of information on your arrival time to make sure that people aren't lingering in those unloading zones for longer than necessary, and just kind of direct you to next steps. We have a lot of really excited people to meet you and your student, and a lot of really great volunteers make this happen. So you'll pull into the unloading zone, and from there you kind of have a couple different options. If your student is coming with support, whether it's you or other family members, friends, whatever the case may be, we encourage that your student, once you're in the unloading zone, go ahead and proceed inside the building to a check-in station. Again, we'll have lots of signage that will direct your student to that location. That's where we will check to make sure that your student has all of their immunization records, that if there was a minor consent form that needed to get signed, that has been taken care of. We will also at that point give your student probably their ID if they didn't already pick it up at orientation, a convocation Relocation shirt, which is a really phenomenal event that will happen on Saturday. That's kind of our formal university kickoff. And then, of course, issue keys. We will also be able to provide you a moving cart. And so you do have the option of utilizing one of those to help move items from the vehicle into the room. However, we do encourage you to bring, if you feel necessary, additional dollies or hand trolleys, just to continue to expedite the move-in process. So while your student is inside checking in, we kind of encourage you to do the method that we jokingly call the jump and dump. Jump out of that car and start putting things on the sidewalk. We'll have tarps that are next to the unloading zone that your student can go ahead or you can go ahead and start unloading your vehicle. Once your student comes back out with a laundry cart, certainly start utilizing that laundry cart, put those items into the cart, and then we can start heading upstairs. So that's the relocating item piece. Of course, if you have only a half hour in the unloading zone, it's not going to be enough time for you to start setting up the room and to unpack and everything. So really, truly, this would be basically an unloading of those items and moving them up into the space. Once everything has been unloaded from the vehicle and the items are in the student room or apartment, the next part would be relocating the vehicle. At this point, you would go ahead, if you are on Volker, specifically in one of our residence halls, you would head over to the Cherry Street parking structure, which is located actually just right in the middle of both of our residence halls. So very convenient. It is open parking as long as you're not parking illegally in like an ADA spot or something like that. Otherwise, it is an open parking garage for the weekend that you are able to then relocate your vehicle over to that location. If your student is coming by themselves, we do have the option of kind of doing the check-in and then jump and dump a little bit more sequentially. And so if your student is coming solo, we would then encourage them to go to the unloading zone, park their vehicle in that unloading zone, head on into the facility, make sure to get the keys, the laundry cart, the check on all of their paperwork, and then come back out to their vehicle in order to unload. We are currently recruiting students and faculty and staff to help with some of these pieces as well. So it's very possible that you may have a volunteer also helping unload the vehicle. We do prioritize individuals who come by themselves because obviously sometimes that can be a lot to handle, particularly in that half-hour time frame. But we definitely want to support everyone as much as we are able to. So it's very possible we could have some volunteers that will help with that jump and dump and then the relocating of those items. So once your vehicle is located in the parking garage, you're more than welcome to come on back and really kind of get settled in. So that's where you can do the furniture rearranging, you can do the unpacking, the decorating, really kind of all the fun stuff. And of course, the final piece of the puzzle is enjoying the time together. This may be the last time that you see your student for a while. And so we recognize that overall, this can be a very emotionally charged time. It can sometimes be a very stressful time. And so we want you to really take an opportunity to be able to settle in, explore campus together, go get some really great grub somewhere, and just, really kind of put a nice bow on the end of your move-in experience. So Kim, I'm going to take an opportunity here just to check in with you. Any questions that maybe didn't get answered about move-in day that have been in the chat, or did I answer the parking question adequately?
Yeah, I believe we had a question about cafeteria, and yes, you mentioned about food and what meal plans look like. We had a question, I believe, about parking, and I think you addressed that one. And then We did have a question about lofting beds. I'm not sure if you were addressing that, I forget, in a future one, but what does it look like to reserve and or anticipate the expect when you're expecting the lofting question, if you want to go over any of that, if that makes sense right now.
Okay. I did neglect, I specifically mentioned where to park for the residence halls, but if a student is moving into Hospital Hill Apartments, we have a garage that is attached to the facility. Generally, during the academic year, students have to have a very specific parking pass in order to gain access to that parking garage. However, during move-in weekend, we do open that garage up for our students and guests to utilize. And so that would be where individuals park for that location. And then with Rock Hill, every student has access to a parking spot specifically for them. And so they can utilize that parking spot in order to unload. And the closest garage is the Rock Hill parking garage that then any additional vehicles can get relocated over to that side. So I did neglect to mention that piece. As far as lofting kits go, lofting kits are only available in Oak Street Hall. And regardless of if you are in Oak Street Hall or Johnson Hall, the beds can be raised to a pretty significant height within the bed frame. So without that lofting kit, it's certainly high enough to put, storage underneath. If someone has one of those 3-tiered plastic organizing bins, certainly they have the ability to put that under there comfortably. But if your student wants to really truly loft the bed to the point that they can put like their desk underneath, or if they're bringing, a papasan chair, whatever the case may be, it does require a lofting kit at Oak Street Hall. In Johnson Hall, you're able to change the bed frame around to actually loft the bed within the provided end caps, so no additional lofting kit required, but in Oak Street it is. We sent out an email about those lofting kits a few weeks ago, and we are currently on a wait list for the lofting kits. So everything that we've had, they have already been reserved. And so if you reserved a lofting kit, those will be delivered to student rooms, we hope before move-in. So whether you are in Oak Street Hall or Johnson Hall, if you want to raise the bed, adjust it in any way, it is helpful to have a rubber mallet with you. We do have a handful of those at the front desk available for checkout. So if you forget it or you just don't have room, certainly we can get you taken care of. But if you walk into the room and you're like, yeah, the bed's at hip height, I really would prefer to have it all the way down to the ground, you have the ability to adjust the bed within its frame, but it makes it much easier when you have a rubber mallet with you.
Awesome. That was actually one of the questions. Is a mallet needed for lofting? So Audrey, so you can bring it from home or also get it from the front desk area. And then a question also related maybe to lofting, but also in general, is there a rail on the bed for bunking or any type of ladder?
So in Johnson Hall, there is a rail that is available. In Oak Street, there is no rail. And then as far as ladders are concerned, no ladders are provided, but the way that the ends of the beds are designed, students utilize the ends of the beds as ladders in order to gain access to their lofted beds.
Wonderful. 2 more questions just about move-in. Oh, another one about move-in too. So for folks who are living in Oak, where specifically is the drop-off location for Oak Street? Will there be signs directing us? And where and when can the student purchase the parking pass for the Cherry Street garage? And I know you addressed a little bit of this, but maybe just direct that question again. So for Oak Street folks, signs, drop off, and then I guess a good segue into that too is, yeah, does the student need like day one in the residence halls their parking pass for for Cherry Street?
Yeah, so they don't need it day one. Parking is a little bit more accommodating, obviously recognizing the fact that we have just a massive amount of folks moving onto campus. And so they absolutely need their parking pass come Monday, that first day of class. They will definitely start enforcing parking expectations at that point. But as far as parking is concerned, I understand sooner rather than later as far as ordering those parking passes. I definitely am not a parking expert because I actually commute to campus through a carpool option. So I don't currently park on campus, so I don't have a whole lot of additional specifics about that. So I don't know if Kim, you have anything that would be helpful for the person who posed the question or not. But
I put the website in the overall chat as well on the Facebook live, as well as on our chat. I am also not a parking expert, but I do know that as we joke in orientation, our parking team does love their jobs. And it's best that if your student does anticipate living and or parking on campus, that they do what's best for them, but follow the protocols so that you're not getting calls about a boot on a car or, hundreds of dollars worth of tickets. I, as a faculty staff member, have a parking pass. Others, the entire community essentially has to pay for parking. So there isn't some secret magical way to just park for free unless they do off site, and that is at their own kind of adventure because street parking, et cetera, is not always the most available since we are an urban campus. Our parking passes did go on sale officially on the 25th, and our parking team is very easily accessible, and I put the website again in the chat.
great, 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 great. And yes, there'll be plenty of signage on and around the facility as far as directing you to an unloading zone. For Johnson Hall, there is a driveway off to the side of the facility, to the south side of Johnson Hall, that you would be able to utilize and then pull through in order to gain access to, I believe, MLK Boulevard. And then for Oak Street, we have a driveway that's just to the west of the facility, and you'll be able to pull in there and unload. So lots of signage along the street there to direct you. You'll see a lot of really excited UMKC folks that are thrilled to be welcoming you and your student to campus. So you'll definitely see a lot of us out there in our Rue Blue gear. We also will specifically make sure that we have ADA spots available. And so, i.e. people without parking passes or ADA placards or signs won't be able to park in those spaces. And so if that is a concern, if your student has an ADA placard or that need, we'll have cones in those spaces until we get people coming through the unloading zone that need those spaces specifically. So
Katie, another question back to lofting. Is there a way to purchase a lofting kit if enough kits aren't available? What are kind of your rules around bringing in, I guess, like, oh, I bought this on Amazon, or I heard my friend use that. What is the protocol around lofting?
yes, we actually don't allow outside lofting kits. It's a safety and security piece. And so if your student is still interested in lofting kits but did not receive one, we currently have a wait list that's available, and we maintain that wait list for a while. So I will tell you that a lot of people get very confused about what a lofted bed looks like versus just a raised bed. Again, if you are interested in just using your bed area as storage and, just want to put, organizing units underneath there, a raised bed is probably going to cut it for you. If you want it high enough to be able to stand under, either hunch over or whatever, put your desk underneath, that's a loft. And so a lot of people, when they actually show up and see what a lofting kit entails, they're like, oops, I actually got confused. I actually just wanted my bed raised versus lofted. So we sometimes get people even on move-in day say, actually, actually, I don't want that loft kit anymore. Likewise, because, I mean, lofting has definitely a certain appeal to it. But that shine has a tendency to wear off a little bit within the first week or so. And students are like, wait a minute, if I'm, staying up until 11 o'clock midnight studying or hanging out with people or going to events around campus, like I'm exhausted by the time I come back, and I have to climb up into my bed every single time if I want to take a nap or if I'm just using it as a study location. And so people have a tendency over, the first week or two to also return their loft kits. And so definitely, if it's of interest, put yourself on the wait list, and as they become available, we'll let you know.
So long story short, the reason I asked that one, and just to have it recorded, we really strongly discourage like the DIY lofting, because it really is a safety concern. And also, again, we are a community in terms of just making sure that all of our staff are then not later on telling your student, please remove that. So just again, setting some of those expectations early on and communicating that so that you can help your student be successful and not get everything all set. And then a staff member comes by after you're gone and says, hey, you need to remove that Amazon loft kit, that DIY loft kit. It just makes it awkward for everybody. So thanks in advance.
All right, so let's transition a little bit because I do have a few more things I wanted to touch upon. Roommate relationships. So we recognize that this is probably your student's first time living with someone, particularly living with someone in the same room. And so we expect that there is going to be hiccups along the way. So a couple things that we always encourage, students have to go into this situation understanding that they are truly sharing the space. Yes, everyone has their own bed, everyone has their own desk, but there are some things in that space that are just communal and are going to have to be shared as such. Don't go in there taking up the whole micro fridge and then huff when, someone can't fit their, Coke can in the fridge, or the thermostat is often a pretty highly discussed kind of conversation. And so if you are a polar bear and love to have the thermostat at 68 degrees, and the other person is constantly having to wear a parka every time they go into the room, I mean, there definitely needs to be some level of compromise and some understanding that everyone is going to be sharing this space. I highly encourage to start asking some of those questions now. If you have submitted a contract, it is likely that you already have your assignment and you may have roommates and suite mates, apartment mates. So start thinking about what are some of those items that I'm really going to need to figure out in advance. How do we feel about thermostats? How do we feel about guests in the room? How do we feel about younger siblings coming to visit? Who is going to be buying toilet paper? Who is responsible for cleaning some of these community areas, whether it's a bathroom in the residence hall or the kitchen in the apartments? Start asking those questions now. So if there's barriers, you can start addressing how to figure out, to overcome those barriers before you actually get here. Acknowledge those differences and similarities in the beginning. Again, being transparent and understanding that there are going to be things that we may not see eye to eye on, and that is okay. But we need to figure out how to move forward from some of those challenges. And it's never inappropriate to establish ground rules. These ground rules don't have to be set in stone. Obviously, as a department, we have expectations and rules and regulations. We have a policy book known as the Guide to Group Living, which is available on our website. But it is okay to say that, all guests need to be out of our room by 9 p.m. or, it is important that we always take out the trash on Mondays or something like that. And those ground rules are welcome to change as you get used to living with each other, as the students are kind of figuring out a rhythm, like those rules can be revisited. One of the things that we provide for students upon move-in is a roommate and suite mate agreement form. It does outline some of those more talked about issues in a room. How do we address conflict? Who is responsible for picking up? Like, what is really clean? Because what someone views as clean in one family, one household, is going to be different than another's. And so that form, which again, our RAs are very much so trained to review and help navigate through some of those differences with the students. But I encourage you to not only have your student fill out that roommate suite mate agreement, but also just establish those rules that might not be on that sheet. And don't be afraid to speak up. It is so much easier to address potential areas of concern earlier than when it's reaching an explosive level. Throughout my time in residential life, I can't even begin to explain how hard it is when people try to address things through like Post-it notes, leaving a little note on the fridge that says, "This is disgusting, please clean," has a very different vibe to it than someone saying like, "Hey, we talked about cleaning out the fridge last week. Where are you with that process?" And so, speaking up, but being kind about it, being direct about it. And again, our staff are more than happy to assist if you need help facilitating that conversation. And again, because we are all coming from different backgrounds, whether you're living with someone you've never met before or whether you're living with your best friend from high school, conflict is going to happen. And so trying to figure out, again, proactively, if something comes up, how are we going to handle that? Are we immediately going to utilize our RA, our resident assistant? Are we going to try to work it out internally? Is it something that I can bounce ideas off my suite mate about how to handle this concern, or do we just keep it internal? What does that look like? And again, I mentioned those resources, RAs, your professional level staff, that roommate agreement form. We also have something called room swap season, 3 weeks into each semester. And so sometimes we realize that, particularly after giving it, no pun intended, the good old college try, you and that roommate may not be compatible. And so we have basically an opportunity for students to switch rooms that 3 weeks into that semester. And so you'll start seeing some signage about that, usually about 2 weeks into the semester, and we'll have lots of information about that. So there's that option as well. We definitely want students to feel comfortable with their roommate and suite mates. And so we're happy to help to try to find a solution for someone who also might be an early riser and who likes the room really, really warm. So we have the option to do that as well. So there are a couple different things. Again, I've mentioned the RAs and the professional staff numerous times. They definitely are fabulous, fabulous, fabulous individuals who are there to support y'all around the clock. So I know that oftentimes they have a tendency to be a little bit more visible at the beginning of the term, whether it's through move-in, these fabulous welcome events. But even if you need them, at 8 p.m. on a Thursday in October, I mean, that's what they are there for. And it's not necessary that your student utilizes their particular RA either. So if they have a concern and it's more urgent, they can either come to the welcome desk, they can utilize another RA for services and assistance. So don't hesitate to utilize the myriad of folks who are really here for your student. I mentioned work orders briefly. It's possible that something is wrong in the room or maybe breaks in the room. Someone brought flushable wipes. Please, just as a hot tip, do not bring flushable wipes to our on-campus housing, or disposable wipes. Those do not agree with plumbing, and so even though they are labeled as flushable, it's a scam. And so please do not leave that. But let's just say that someone went rogue and had a clogged toilet or something like that because of a flushable wipe. Like, you have the ability to put in work orders for those things. you can submit work orders through RuRes, which is that portal that I mentioned. Anything water related though, my toilet is overflowing, my sink is clogged and it's backing up. Those are definitely things we want you to come down to the welcome desk and report right away, because those have a tendency to get much bigger than what they need to be. So timely communication on those pieces. But if it's something, as far as my light in my room is burnt out, or I need a replacement this, a replacement that, work orders through RuRes is a fabulous option. And then kind of wrapping up a little bit, once Welcome has passed, again, Kim and her team have just some really outstanding events that are planned for the first several weeks while our students are getting acclimated to the university, or just getting reacclimated to university life. And so definitely encourage students to check that out. There's so many great opportunities. We also have Residence Hall Council, or RHC. It's another one of our acronyms, but it's basically a student government opportunity within residential life. And so students have the ability to host programs, to provide, different services to the residence halls, but they're also a very powerful voice of change. And so if they are not happy with something, or they would like to see something in the residence halls because they feel like it would make their residential life experience better, they have the power to have those conversations and to implement that change. And so we have elections right off the bat. So if your student is interested in getting some leadership opportunities, I highly encourage them to scope out Residence Hall Council. Additionally, we have lots of programs internally that happen. They go from anything like, how to secure internships, to succulent planting, to just a good old-fashioned pizza party. And so there are so many opportunities for students to get involved through that platform. So definitely keep your eye out for flyers and social media postings that outline what type of events are happening in the facility, because there's usually always something going on. And then finally, I get asked this question a lot. How does my student become a RA or a resident assistant? And so we certainly encourage folks to scope out that opportunity. It's a wonderful way to get some outstanding leadership skills. We start publicizing the RA process in December, and then applications usually close on February 1st. So if your student is interested in coming back to residential life as an employee, those are some important dates to keep in mind. So speaking of important dates to keep in mind, planning ahead as we're getting to the end of our time together, some things to note, and I'll probably go through this relatively quickly just because it is being recorded and you can refer back to the webinar later. But our academic year contracts for the following year open up on December 1st. So if you're already thinking about where will my student live after their first year at UMKC, we definitely do have options available. And so the sooner you submit your housing contract, the more likely you are to get your preferences. So something to keep in mind there. And then also we do have summer housing available, usually both in our resident hall, one of our residence halls, and one of our apartment complexes. And so having those contracts available is a really great thing to note. Usually those become available February 1st of the following year. We mentioned a little bit that we go on reduced operations during break periods. And so we have fall break listed there. Basically, the day after the final day of class is when we close at noon or go to reduced operations at noon. And then usually the Sunday prior to is when we open back up to full operation. So we'll have our desks back at 24 hours. We'll have all of our staff returned. And so students, again, are more than welcome to stay during break periods, regardless of where they live. However, we would just need for them to fill out a form. Usually that form would come out a few weeks before the break period, so we know just from a safety and security standpoint as who's in the facility. Winter break is obviously a little bit of a longer break, so we close, excuse me, or go to reduced operations on the 17th, and then we open back up Friday, January 13th at 8 a.m. Same thing for spring break. It's about a week-long time frame. So we close on that Saturday, go to reduced operations. Sorry, this is a little bit of a shift for us. And so we don't close, we just go to reduced operations, but my verbiage is still sometimes reflective of that. But so we do reduced operations on that Saturday and then open back up fully on that Sunday. And then the last day of occupancy for the 2022-2023 academic year will be Saturday, May 13th at noon. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you found this information helpful, regardless of where your student may be in the process. Again, we still have space available. And so we highly encourage that if you're thinking about on-campus living, have a conversation with us. I'm happy to walk through this a little bit more with you and talk about why it's a great option for your student. We can be reached at the email that's listed there, housing@umkc.edu, or our telephone number. Right now, I will say that our lines are hopping because we're getting a lot of questions about move-in and all of what's going on. So an email might be actually a quicker way to get a response from us versus the telephone number, but certainly it's there if you need anything. Kristen, as I kind of powered through all of that, any final words that you would like to share or anything that I neglected to mention that would be helpful?
No, I think you hit on all the key points. And then I tried to keep up with answering the questions in the Q&A. So hopefully that helped folks with some of the details that were important for them.
I also have been cutting and pasting some of the questions that weren't answered directly by Katie or Kristen via verbally. So Kristen behind the scenes was amazing in putting some of the answers to folks more if there was more specific to them. But I cut and paste in the Facebook in the live stream. They are under the comments and some of the websites I linked to in the chat and some different things. So when folks see this in a week from now, they're like, oh, wait, what does ADA access or handicap parking look like? Okay, here's an answer from the Director of Residential Life. So folks can also refer back to some of those Q&As that Katie, Kristen, and I have been answering. And then we did have one question about fraternities and sororities, and that is a separate process than residential life. If a fraternity or sorority has any type of chapter housing, that's separate in terms, not directly like in residential life's realm there, correct, right? And so, I'm happy to answer any questions about that via, families@umkc.edu or our fraternity and sorority website, which I sent along to the folks that were asking that question.
Great.
Any other questions, friends? This has been great in terms of the amount of information Katie's been able to share. Katie, we will probably upload these slides if you're comfortable as well, even just separately onto a files section of our Facebook group, as well as on our resources, because we recognize, again, everybody kind of retains information a little bit differently. Or if you are, again, sharing some of this information for your students, you can, share with them the roommate stuff or the really nice and organized way Katie laid out move in, because we recognize, again, that this can be stressful, it can be exciting, it can be celebratory, it can be all the things. And so I'm just very thankful for Katie and Kristen today, recognizing that this type of parent and family talk is really important. Tax for walls. Yes, just tax for walls, correct? That is the question that was just answered.
Yep. So it may be a little counterintuitive, especially with all the marketing efforts, but we actually don't allow adhesives. So tax, push pins, definitely the way to go.
No worries, no worries, folks. No question is silly. We're here for you and happy that you came today to ask these questions. One other plug I am going to put in for folks who are around during move in, parents, families, and supporters. Myself, Parent and Family Programs, Residential Life, and our Honors Program, and a few other campus partners are going to be running some parent and family lounges. We recognize sometimes the whole family comes to move in, but maybe it might be a lot to have everybody there for the entire time, or this you might want to have, family member X go and just chill for a moment while you run errands with your student at Target or something. From 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of move in, we will have in our Cherry Hall, which is right behind the garage and right behind Oak Street, so conveniently located and just a little off the beaten path, if you will. We'll have some snacks. We'll have an area that's nice and air conditioned and quieter, if that just makes sense for folks. Again, I have worked in residential life on and off for much of my student and professional career and have seen families where they just needed a moment to just be away from the situation, no fault of their own. It's just a lot's going on. Or again, any folks who just need maybe just as on sensory overload. We are here to help in that space. We'll be staffed from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. For early move-ins, we'll have some snacks and some different things centralized, and then we'll send some more information out about that as we get a little bit closer.
Great. All right. Well, thanks everyone for chatting with us. We really appreciate it. And certainly if you have any other questions, we're happy to assist. So thanks for hanging out with us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead then and stop our recording.